Okay, so I'm going to ask you guys, what barriers do you have to eating well as a student? So if you feel comfortable, you can take yourself off mute. Otherwise, just share in the chat if you have any thoughts. Time, yeah, that's a big one, eh, Angela? Yep, money, definitely. Yeah, and as students, we're poor on both of those things, right? We're not, we might not have any income coming through, or it might just be sort of, that 5 to 10 hours a week that we are working. And food is expensive in this day and age as well. I know when I was a student 6+ years ago, it was very much the case then, and things have only gotten worse over time. Any other barriers that we have, or any challenges that you find to eating healthy as a student? Recipes, yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's about finding some good recipes to make. I've got a little bit of that towards the end of the workshop. Hopefully be helpful. Cool, thanks guys. Move into the next slide now. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about the basics of nutrition, and I'm just going to put out there that I'm studying in this realm at the moment. I'm not an expert by any means, and do invite any questions or comments as they do pop up for any of you. Oh, Bala, nice, you're plant-based. Oh, that's cool. Yeah, we're going to talk a little bit about that as well. So I've got here on the slide JERF, and you're probably wondering what that means. And essentially it is just an acronym for Just Eat Real Foods. So the research suggests that if we can try and eat unprocessed, raw, whole foods, that and that forms the bulk of our diet, then that is the best thing that we can do. So that's a really good thing to try and remember. And yeah, and I know as students it's really easy to just eat high sugar, high fat, to just get us through all the study that we're doing and to give us that quick boost of energy. But hopefully by the end of the workshop, you'll have a few ideas of how to avoid that and what alternatives there might be out there. So why eat well? So when we have a high veg, fruit, and where we can berries in our diet, this is consistently correlated with improved health outcomes for a range of disorders. So reducing our ultra refined foods in the diet is key for reducing mortality and morbidity. So you want to ask yourself, is 80% of your meal a natural, unrefined food? So essentially, does it come from a plant? Does it come from the ground? Or is there stuff in there that you don't know what it is, or your grandma perhaps wouldn't recognize? Another few pointers, just in terms of broadly speaking, is that humans, we're not a grazing animal, right? We're well suited to periods of fasting and feasting. There's not really much benefit to snacking, and evidence suggests a strong link between snacking, obesity, and poor quality food choices. So if we can base our meals, so ideally 2 to 3 meals a day based on natural, whole and unprocessed foods, and this means that we can auto-regulate and our blood glucose levels are also okay. And so we're going to move on to looking at fats now. So fats are used for both structure and fuel and include things like oils. So things like olive oil, sesame oil, what you use to cook your food. So for me, that's usually olive oil or butter. It might include avocados, egg yolks, and nuts and seeds as well. And fats are really good for us, being sedimentary. I can never pronounce that word, sedimentary. If you're sitting a lot during the day, it's really good if we can have more fats than, say, carbohydrates, for example, because fats are used for a fuel. we'll talk about carbs a little bit later on. Protein is required for structure of the muscles. So we do need quite a bit of protein to keep us fuller for longer, and yeah, it's really good if we can base our meals around protein. So these can include things like milk, cheese, eggs, meat, and yogurt. And the benefits of having enough protein is improved lean muscle, bone health, satiety, as I mentioned, and cardiovascular health. So ideally what we want to do is that we want to aim for 1 to 2 palm sizes of protein in each meal. And someone mentioned that they're plant-based, and there's certainly a lot of protein sources that are vegetarian and vegan, such as like legumes, pulses, soy-based products, that kind of thing. And I guess there it's important that we can get a variety of proteins, as some are sort of naturally produced in the body and some aren't. So essential versus non-essential. I won't get too complicated today. We'll just stick to the basics. So also with our meals, we want to aim for 1 to 2 thumb sizes of fats per meal. So olive oil, butter, coconut oil, and then we can add our carbs after we've got our protein, fiber, and good fats. So yeah, with that, I'm just going to touch on fiber. So this is really important for our gut health. So ensuring that we're feeding those microbiome within our gut, and also just so we can sort of process our foods well and digest them and all of that. So yeah, it's really important that we can get our fiber, and often we get that from things like fruit and veg, different protein sources as well is really good for that. And I've got down here water. So water is something that I think we forget about here, because I think I read a quote once and it said something like 80% of the time when we think we're hungry, we're actually thirsty. And I know that I'm guilty of not drinking enough water as well. So we want to aim for at least 2 to 3 litres per day of water, and try to go for 3 if you're partaking in exercise and movement. And the last note here is around supplements. So what I'll say with supplements is that we want to go for food first, and then what we can't get from our diet, we want to then look to supplements. So we don't want to prioritize supplements over our actual food. So improving the quality of our nutrition is the priority, and then you can use supplements to help fill the gaps. So say if you are highly stressed, you're a highly stressed student, which I can totally understand, or if you play a lot of sport, or if just for convenience you can't really get those nutrient levels in, then I would recommend a supplement. And taking something like doing a blood test can show where you might be low in those micronutrients, so those things like iron and magnesium and all of that is what we call micronutrient. Okay, so move on to the next slide. And we're just going to touch very quickly on carbs. And the research actually shows us that carbs are non-essential. However, they are activity dependent. So as I said earlier, if we're more sedentary, then we will need more fats. But if we're more active, we require more carbohydrates. And carbohydrates are the primary fuel for the brain and for things like HIIT training. However, there's no minimum requirement for carbs in the diet. So yeah, it is a little bit hard to know how much carbs we should be eating. And yeah, I'd encourage you to firstly look at your protein, your fats, fiber, and then putting carbs sort of at the bottom of that list. If you're unsure about how to sort of base your meals and structuring them going forward, it can be a good guideline. Fasting is quite a big trend at the moment, and yeah, I would just encourage you to exercise caution if you are wanting to get into fasting. It does have some amazing benefits, but it's really important that we can gradually ease our body into something like that. A really good way to start would just be to having like a 12-hour fasting period, say overnight. So I try and do this myself every day. I try and finish eating at, say, 7:30 p.m. each night, and then I won't eat anything the next day until 7:30 a.m. For others, they might increase that to sort of 14 hours and have 10 hours of eating. But yeah, I do encourage you to sort of seek doctors or a nutritionist's opinion if you are wanting to start something like that. And we've got some questions in the chat, which is awesome. And how would you replace bread in a diet? Yeah. I probably eat a loaf of oats. Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good question, Amanda. Bread is a really tricky one. I would just recommend looking at what is in the bread. So it totally depends on if it's like a white bread or like a brown, sort of brown bread. I would recommend going with a bread that does have like more nuts and seeds in it, for example, just so you are getting a higher sort of fat and protein based bread rather than like carbohydrate based bread. And yeah, Michelle, you've raised a really good point of eating something like corn thins instead of bread. And yeah, rice and pasta, that's a really good one, Angela. You can get a lot of variety these days with things like rice and pasta. So I would recommend, going for like a brown-based rice over, say, white, because that has a higher fiber and I think protein content than, say, the white rice does. And pastas, you can actually get like lentil-based pasta, I think like green-based pasta, if you are wanting to look into those options as well. Myself, I'm gluten-free, so I can only speak to what's sort of available with the gluten-free. But yeah, and Vala, yeah, you've raised a really good point. Yeah, keto bread, yeah, far away from real food. Yeah, that's a good point. You definitely have to look at the ingredients list, and just see what sort of forms that bread, because we want to be able to recognize all of those ingredients ideally and know that it's from a natural source. Yeah, and then price comes into it too. And yeah, if you haven't tried it, I'd recommend making your own breads. It can be really fun, and sometimes it can be cheaper as well. Having your own like sourdough mix or something like that. Oh, whoopsie days, skipping slides. Okay, so I'm just going to just talk about some more tips that I would recommend for you guys, and what I've sort of learnt to make things easier. And yeah, Michelle, that's awesome. You do your own baking. Yeah, that can be a really good thing to do for your well-being and just, you know, alleviating stress and things like that as well. And then you know exactly what's in your food. So just put some top tips down here, and some of these I've touched on already. And the first one is around basing your meal on a protein. So thinking about, you know, is it going to be a meat-based protein, might be a vegetarian-based, or might be something like oats, or an egg or something. We've got some ideas coming up. aiming for 30 plant-based foods a week. And I know that sounds like a lot, right, when we think about 30. And this is really good for our gut health. So if we can have good diversity in what the foods that we're taking in, it's really good for us in terms of our digestion. And these things can include like herbs and spices, anything naturally derived. So we want to aim for 30 a week. Rainbow, so looking at different colours of fruit and veg can be really useful. So that just ensures that we get a wide range of minerals and vitamins into our diet. So yeah, for me, like every time I go to the supermarket or to my local fruit and veg store, I think, okay, last time I got some apples to snack on, this time I might get some stone fruit, for example, and it just means that I'm expanding the type of food that I'm having in my diet, giving me that diversity as well. Something that you can ask yourself when you're cooking a meal is, can I add just one more? So it might be just one more vegetable. Can I have just one more fruit in the fruit salad I'm making? Or could I put on just one more type of nut in my porridge or something? And this just can help us get to that 30 that we talked about. The fifth tip that I have for you is only eating when you're hungry. So I think a lot of us were so used to, okay, it's 12 o'clock, I've got to have lunch now because that's when I should be having lunch, even when you might not be hungry. So I really encourage you to listen to your body and pick up on those cues of when your tummy starts to rumble or whatever symptoms you might have when you're feeling hungry. And this just means that we're in tune with our body, we're sort of being more mindful as to when we are hungry, and we're able to sort of put a schedule in around that as well. So and it might mean that you're not necessarily hungry until like 10 a.m. in the morning, and you might push out your lunch and your dinner as a result of that. It's different for everyone, and also depending on factors like when you exercise or when you play sport or that kind of thing. Finding a local veg store and market. So I know for me, like when I lived in Wellington, I would go down to the local market in the weekends, and the veg was so much cheaper there compared to at the supermarket at New World, for example. So just having a bit of a shop around and a research as to what the different shops are near you that you could support. And it's really nice to be able to support people like, the butcher and the local markets as well. And probably the biggest tip I have is cooking in bulk. Like that's honestly been so helpful for me in the past, and especially when you're on a budget, being able to cook like maybe 5 or 6 portions of a meal at a time, and then you might freeze half of it, and then you've got something you can just whip out the night before and defrost and take into uni with you, for example. I'll just check the chat. We've got a few things here. Oh yeah, good point, Claire. Is that 30 portions? So 30 different plants is what I mean by that. Yeah. Struggle with snacking. Yeah, that's a big thing, isn't it? I definitely felt the same when I was a student, and often when we're stressed, we like to reach for the chips and the chocolate and all those sorts of things. What I can suggest, Michelle, is maybe substituting snacks with things like herbal tea or a green tea or something, that you're still having that kind of tactile sensation with the drinking, or you might have some water or something instead. I find that to be quite useful to try and curb those cravings. And then you'll also find that when you are listening to your body when it's hungry and you're sort of feasting and that period of having a meal, you'll probably be so full that you won't want to snack after a while. It will just become a little bit more natural just to have those 2 or 3 meals a day. Okay, so I'm going to ask you guys now, what is your go-to healthy and cheap meal? And if you want to unmute yourself, please do. Otherwise, just type in the chat if you've got any great meals that have worked for you. Veg spag bowl, yum. Well, it sounds amazing. Sounds nice and easy too, Amanda. Mashed up chickpeas, ooh, yum. Stir fries, yeah, stir fries are really good. Brown rice with lots of veg, cool. And that's where like sauces can really help as well, like obviously depending on the sugar content of them, and you know, looking through that ingredient list and making sure you know, we recognize most of the ingredients in the list can add a bit of flavor. And same with like, you know, the curry powders or herbs and spices to help us get to those 30 different plants a week. Awesome. Thanks, guys, for all your tips there. Smoothies with fruits. Yep. And cinnamon. Oh, yes. Cinnamon's a key. Yeah. Totally agree there, Angela. Oh, bala. Different types of dal. Yum. Oh, I'm getting really hungry listening to all these ideas. Okay. Go on to. Cool. So I've just got some different links here that I thought might be quite useful as a bit of a starting point. And I've got some pictures of some stuff that I know works for me when I'm on a budget, and you know, that I wish I'd made more of when I was a student. So I've just got here an omelette on the top left hand side. They're super easy to make. The key is having 3 eggs, as I found out. 3 eggs, you know, you just whip it up with a fork, put it in the pan, and then you can have things like mushrooms, spinach, tomato, cheese if you want as well, and then yeah, flipping it. It can be so simple but so tasty and quick as well. And quiches are something that I'm trying to get more into as well. And they're both really good ways of using up things that you've got in the fridge. And often, yes, it's quite a cost-effective meal to make as well. Overnight oats seem to be really taking off as well. And it's something that you can make in bulk the night before. And yeah, for me, I can't eat oats, so I can't really comment on how delicious it is, but I certainly know that it can be a really good sort of balanced meal option with using oats as the base, and then you can put sort of different seeds and nuts and things on there as well, maybe with banana or yogurt to get the little bit of carb and protein content as well. Yeah, someone mentioned that smoothies is their go-to, and yeah, that's absolutely a great way to go. I've got some different recipe links there for different types of smoothies, and smoothies are another good way to use up what you've got in the cupboard. You might invest in some spirulina powder, or for me, it's a really good way of ensuring that I have some leafy greens in my diet, because I really struggle to eat like kale on its own because it tastes so gross. But if I have kale with something like pineapple and berries in a smoothie, it's a lot more palatable. Okay, and I'm just going to end the workshop just by talking about some different types of support that we have. You know, if you want to know more about this sort of content, or just curious as to what support teams we have here at Massey. We've got our My Hub where you guys probably signed up for this workshop, and under the Wellbeing tab, we've got a whole lot of different resources there. You can get a hold of our team on this email address here, the student care email address. We've also got a counselling service who they're doing appointments via Zoom and over the phone at the moment. Our advocates through the different student associations, and I do believe there's a distance advocate as well if you need support with things like financial assistance, or you want to raise a complaint about anything through the university, then they're a really good way to do that through. We've got our Chaplaincy Service. So here in the Manawatu, we've got the centre, and they run events like a meditation group, an online, in-person anxiety support group. And yeah, a really cool app that we're just launching at the moment is Talk Campus. And this is a peer-to-peer mental health platform where you can have 24/7 support by professionals and the peers at Massey as well. And it's all anonymous, and yeah, really cool platform. I really encourage you to have a look. There's some really awesome wellbeing resources on there too. And then I've just got a couple of other resources as well as some phone numbers that you can call if you do need some help, or you just want to talk to someone about anything at all, and some websites that are really good in terms of mental health and wellbeing support. Just check the chat here. Oh, nice, Bala, some different spinach, tomato, beetroot. Yep, definitely. Cool. So I'm just going to open up to you guys now, and I'm conscious of time, so just ask if you have any questions or comments. Please feel free to type in the chat, and I will be posting these recordings on my hub, hopefully, yeah, as soon as possible, so that you can listen to these recordings in your own time. And yeah, we're always looking to put on different workshops to cater for student requests. So if there's something you want to learn about in more detail, or like you're struggling with something in particular, please give us an email through that student care email address, and we will do our very best to cater for the requests that we get. Yeah, Amanda, that's a really good question. So the recordings will be on that wellbeing tab, and I'm yet to put them up there. I'm about halfway through that at the moment. So wellbeing, and then I think COVID support is where I'll put them on. The My Hub's being sort of renovated at the moment, so we're going to have a new look and feel quite soon, because I know it's a little bit old and clunky at the moment. Oh, thanks, Angela. I'm pleased that you like that suggestion around drinking tea. Yeah, it's really worked for me, being a sweet tooth, so hopefully it can work for you as well. Awesome, thank you. I'm just going to stop recording.